Hello, and welcome to the Ask Dr. Riley show. My name is Dr. Anissa Riley, and this is, like you heard me say, the Dr. Riley show. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you and to have a very special guest here. If you have been in the hip hop world, whether it's Christian or secular, and you don't know this person, then you are missing out on your whole entire life. And when I say your entire life, I mean your entire life, because what we're about to break down, the conversation we're about to get into, is really going to touch your whole life. So, my guest today is his name is Pastor Richie Righteous. Yes, you heard me, Pastor Richie Righteous. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Riley. It's good to be on the show today. Shout out to the audience and everybody watching.
Yes.
What a wonderful intro, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I try. I do a little something. I'm trying.
Yes.
So this season, we have identified the theme as identity. And we always like to ask our guests their definition of the word that the theme is based off of. So what is your definition of identity?
I think every time somebody asks me that question, there's a shirt that we in our church, we have our church merch, right? But there's a shirt.
Church merch?
Yeah, church merch, right? It says, identity, Christ is. And so for me, I think everybody has a worldview. They're sort of like our lens in which we view life through. And ultimately, you can think of your identity as whatever you want it to be, but whatever those lenses are that you're viewing life through, that's what you really are. So whether you're viewing it through past trauma, whether you're viewing it through, philosophies and ideologies, and for me personally, in all my research, I found that the man Jesus is truth. And I follow his teachings, and so I bury whatever I would desire to be and desire to be all that he is. So my identity is wrapped up in Jesus.
Wow.
So I don't have an identity crisis. My identity, Christ is.
Hey, you just said some bars.
Come on, man. You know what it is? Y'all already, what's up? What's good?
I'm telling y'all, if y'all haven't heard his lyrics, because there's some lyrics that you say, we're not going to get in there but I'll just be like, yo, how you just do that? But for you to even say that, I don't have an identity crisis, because Christ is. Ooh,
right.
That went over your head.
Right.
Over mine. But I like the way you said the lens that you're looking through, because I think it's the lenses that people begin to switch that causes the identity crisis.
Right. Absolutely.
And so what would you say to people who have the trauma lens or have the philosophical lens or an ideology lens, that they are switching these lenses that are causing them to have this crisis?
Yeah, I think, right now in this studio, the people who are watching this, you don't know, there's cameras set up, and every camera, every lens gives you a different view. The cameras are what they are. I tell it this way. One time when I was doing music and I was, first wanted to shoot my first music video, I was tired of shooting these videos that were looking cheesy. So I said, I'm going to run down to B&H in New York City. I said, I'm going to buy the best camera I can, and I want everything to come out looking like Steven Spielberg shot this. So I went to the camera guy, I went to the counter, I said, hey man, I'm trying to shoot these videos and I want them to look amazing. He said, I got the camera for you. New York salesman.
Yeah.
So he said, I got the camera for you. And he's selling me the camera. He said, this camera is going to blow you away. So I bought the camera, went over, and I was shooting everything, and everything was looking still like trash. So I went back, I said, hey man, you got me. He said, oh, New York style salesman. He said, I forgot to tell you something. The camera is excellent, but what's going to get you the picture to look the way you want it to look is lens. And I said, what do you mean? And I was, I didn't know nothing about camera. So he brought a 50 millimeter lens and he attached it, and it immediately brought the subject close. Then he brought a wide angle and it captured the whole room. And every lens that he attached did something different. Now the brain was the same, but the lens kept changing the picture. And I think you have to understand in life that what is true for that camera is true for you. And some lens you choose to pick up, some lens are attached to you.
Yeah.
If you're a divorced person and you didn't plan for that, a lens was given to you that you didn't ask for. And if you're not careful, you can now paint life with the broad brush
of the divorce lens.
Or the parent rejecting me lens, or whatever. And I think that part of winning the battle is to first identify the lens that you're viewing life through. Even for me as a pastor, even for me as a believer, as I get older, I start to realize more things about myself. As a pastor, if somebody comes to the church and they walk out of the church and they start to maybe blame you for not being a good enough preacher, you start to take that as rejection and I'm not good enough. There might be 200 people in the church that loves you. But you view that one, and if you're not careful, you could let that be attached to you. And so for me, that's why I think God says, do not be conformed to the patterns of the world, but be transformed. And for the believer, the Bible says it is a daily taking up of the cross and denying self. Now, what that simply means to me, and it means a lot, but one of the meanings is that for you to constantly keep the right perspective, it is a daily thing to detach the wrong ones, to bring yourself back to a level of truth.
Well, let me pause you right there because there's something that you said that I want to lift up that I don't want it to get lost on the audience. And that was when you said in your research, you found this lens, which is Jesus.
Right.
Because people are researching and people find the research in maybe this particular philosophy or this particular ideology or this particular, what was it about the research that you journeyed into that said, you know what, Jesus is the lens for me?
Well, I'm looking good. Thank you. Just became a real ID. What's the plan? Impromptu road trip? Actually, the plan is to fly to New York for today's product launch, and then visit the family in California and cap it off with a girls' weekend in New Orleans. You really can just do all that. Sure, I'm a real ID, so I'm good to board any domestic flight. Speaking of which, gotta fly. Nice, enjoy. I'll be here.
Be your real ID self by May 7th, 2025. Find out how at tsa.gov/real ID.
Well, so how long is this show? Well, first, life in itself, right? I think you first have to conclude that there's a higher power. I think that if you look around, if I took you into the desert and I pulled out a square piece of equipment, opened it up, and there's an Apple logo on it.
Yeah.
And then we click the button and it connected to Wi-Fi and it opens up all the internet browsers and all this. And I say to you, Anissa, this intelligently designed piece of equipment came about from billions and billions of years. The sand and the mechanisms of the earth came together and made this computer after billions of years. You look at me and say, Pastor Rich, you tripping. Somebody made that because it's too perfectly designed. Well, there's a design that is more complex than a computer, and that is a human being. That is just the earth in itself. And you go to math class and they tell you that 0 from 0 equals 0. You cannot get anything from nothing. But then you walk one hallway over to science class and they tell you that the world came from nothing. So I would like to put the science teacher with the math teacher and tell them, make it make sense.
Ooh, child, you didn't say that.
Make it make sense. And so if you were to observe the world, even atheists at the end of the day, their problem is not that they don't believe that something did this. Their problem is a submission to the something that did this.
Yes.
That's where I often, when you hear them, even Richard Dawkins and these guys, you'll find interviews with them admitting, well, something must have made this, but why couldn't we say it's an alien? Why couldn't we? So for me, the part of there is a divine being that made us. But then if you want to go further to can we ever know him, then you got to look at things like we getting deep here.
Yeah,
you got to look at things like the moral law. And what I mean by that is inside of every human being, there is a moral compass that
lets you know.
I can meet somebody from a totally different culture. I'll give an example like this. I was on a plane with an agnostic one time. We were traveling, coming back from somewhere. An agnostic brother was sitting next to me. He, struck up a conversation. What do you do? I said, well, I'm a pastor. And he said, oh, I'm agnostic. So for those of you who don't know what an agnostic is, it's somebody who says, I don't know if truth exists. I don't know if may not be. I don't know what to believe, right? They're in between.
Ambiguous.
It could be anything. Blue could be green. Green could be the agnostic, right? So he was sitting there. He said, I'm agnostic. I said, don't worry about it, man. I said, so you don't really believe there's truth? He said, well, you can never know. I said, well, let me ask you something. And he had his family sitting there. I said, if somebody would have came on this plane right now and killed everybody on this plane and murdered your family, would you say that is good or evil? And he said, well, I would have to say that's evil. I said, on what basis? On whose perspective? And he said, you got me there, basically. Because at the end of the day, we all, when we talk to one another, seem to be appealing to this higher truth that we all agree on. The standard of what is right and wrong in every society. And, philosophers come along and they say, well, that's based on the majority of people. It's not.
No, it's not.
Everyone
knows.
Everybody knows what's right and wrong. You can meet people that are remotely living in a community that is not part of a big government. When they spoke, they appeal to this moral compass.
And have an uncivilized language.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And without going, drawing this out, so you got a divine, and then you see this moral compass that kind of says, there is good and evil, and you begin to unpack who he is. Now, how do we get to Jesus from that? Because when you look at every religion, and no disrespect to anybody's religion, if you really begin to unpack it, there is only one man who represents the moral compass, who shows what compassion is, who shows that in us, there's a nature in us that is broken, that is sinful. I've got 4 wonderful kids. I spent all of their lives and continue to teach them right. I never had to teach them to do wrong. That was automatic in them.
Yes, that's every parent.
Little Silas comes into the room. Silas, you hit your brother? No, with the bat in his hand. No, I didn't do it. Like, bro, you're lying, and you hit him, right? You don't have to teach people to do wrong. That's in our nature. And the only thing that offers a change, you see, I got another shirt that says, I'm not an activist, I'm an evangelist. Some people get offended at the shirt because they're like, we got, as believers, we got to be activists. I say, well, you got to understand something. Activists wants to change behavior through political structures, through systems, but the evangelists want to change behavior through heart change. And it is only Jesus Christ who can bring that. And so with all that's happening in the world, with the political divide, the racial divide, all of this and that, you can change the system, but if the people are still in the system, you're going to have the same problems. But if you change the heart of the people, the system will change. So the only change that the person that I've found that can do that, this is based on experience because he's done it for me, is Jesus.
You done said like a whole sermon. mean, if we would have in the interview right now, I think we would have impacted I don't know how many people.
Amen.
And I'm glad you brought that out because people that follow me, follow my show, know that I'm a self-proclaimed Jesus girl. I'm Jesus all the way.
Absolutely.
Because the same heart change that you talk about is what has occurred for me.
Yeah.
So I know it to be real. Like, people say, you've come along too late to tell me he ain't real because I know the change that has occurred in my life from the lenses that I used to wear and the lenses that I used to operate from. So talk about some of those lenses you used to operate from prior to saying, you know what, Jesus is the lens for me, not these rose-colored glasses.
I think human beings, we all share the similar experiences with all the lens that we would wear. And I want to make this clear, even after you become a Christian and follow Jesus, that fight to keep those lenses off continues, right? So there's something we say, the brothers had me laughing last night because in the church world, there's this big movement of deliverance ministry where they try to say everything is a demon. And one of the brothers in the church says everything in a demon, some things are the man. And what he means by that is that some things are just in your nature. Everything is spiritual.
Desire, like you just want it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the church sometimes, and I don't like to beat up on the church sometimes, we learn a lot of our beliefs from the TV and the television evangelists, which no knock to them, but when you research the Bible is much more of a practical book. Spirituality does not matter if it is not manifested in your daily life. The essence of what spirituality look like is found in the way the man Jesus lived. Compassion, loving, caring, and courage, everything you see. So when spirituality becomes where you're just in this mystical world and nobody can understand you, and then you weird, right? Because
and regardless if you're a Christian or not, if you are like, there's Christians who are Bible-toting, always speaking scripture,
and wouldn't speak to their own brother,
and not compassion.
Right. So for me, I just wanted to make the point that it is a constant removing of lens. So prior to the Lord, I lost my father, so I had to deal with death and what that does. I learned how to, growing up in a preacher's home.
So you're a PK.
Yeah, I'm a PK. I learned how to behave and fake it before I was it. And that had a lot of profound effects on my life. And so when my dad passed, my wife, who's my wife now, she became pregnant with my son in a context where this is something that you are now a disgrace if you done this.
Were y'all married at the time?
Nope. Okay. I was going to abort my son. My son is now the drummer in the church. But so with all of that, low self-esteem.
Hold up.
I'm trying to give you all the lens.
Yeah, no, hold up, because some people are like, what?
Yeah.
So wait a minute. So your father?
My father passed away.
You had sex outside of marriage.
Absolutely.
You considered abortion.
Yes.
What?
Yep.
Not
like considered to the point where it's like this was a done deal if God didn't step in like the day of. Yeah.
So you were there at the doorstep of abortion.
Right, pretty much.
And you were about to say low self-esteem.
Yeah, I struggled with that a lot in my life. Comparison. As a preacher's kid, you are perfect before you even are born. There's a perfection that is demanded of you. And even to this day, I struggle with that. I worry about what people think, people's thoughts, because, growing up in preacher, it works like this. In the car, you're arguing, you're fighting, you pull up to church, okay, fix your face now, we're going in church. So, you learn to wear a mask very early, low self-esteem, and, the list go, just about every lens that everybody is face, we at some point we gonna wear a lens that we all are gonna wear, and the Lord has really, people will say this and say, that's the reason you're a believer, because you grew up in a Christian home. But I want to point out something. That is not the reason.
It's not.
And you've got to come to a place in your life where something is truth and it makes sense to you. And when I lost my father of a heart attack, it was devastating. My relationship with my dad wasn't good. I grew up in the Caribbean, was born in Guyana, and migrated to the US about age 9 or 10. Culture shock, grew up in Queens, New York. My father didn't have much, right? So true immigrant story, everybody's going to school. I got the cheap sneakers on. Yeah. They making fun of the sneakers. They making fun of my clothes. My father plants this church, and I'm getting involved in hip hop more and more, start rapping more and more, but living contrary to the word of God. Hanging out with people in New York City that I had no business hanging out with. And one night my father came to me, I was 15 years old, and he said, son, God has a call on your life. And you can chase the things that you think, make sense, or you can begin to, as a young man, study who God is for yourself. I wasn't trying to hear that. I was enjoying New York. I was enjoying streets. I was enjoying everything. A couple of my friends went to Manhattan the next day. For some reason, they got this wild idea to run up in a hotel and do some mischievous stuff. They got arrested. One of them got 15 years. The other one, went through court cases, and a whole bunch of stuff happened there. And I laughed at them. I came home, I laughed. I said, that would never be me. I'm a wild shorty, but they would never catch me. Next day, I went to school, went to Hillcrest High School. They closed the door, and I'm like, yo, my pops is gonna kill me. Caribbean parents are strict. I gotta get into this class. And in New York City, this is what we don't even understand growing up in New York City, Dr. Riley. I was gonna call you. I was gonna call you.
That's the relationship.
But I told my kids the other day, my kids grew up, they went to private school and all that stuff. I said, in New York City school, I don't even realize that you were walking into school every day going through metal detectors. And you're being searched like a criminal every day.
Every single day. And the hallways.
And that was normal, but now looking back is like, how is that normal for a child that before he starts school every day, he is given the same treatment as if you're a criminal, right? And I'm not saying I got the answer for that, because I understand why those measures are taken. But so the next day I went to school, I'm trying to get in, the security guard won't let me get in. We started fighting. I knocked over one of the machines in the middle of the fight. The machine falls, it's broken. They arrest me. I found myself at 15 years old sitting in Central Bookends for an arrest at school. Everybody's talking about what's happening in their life. And one dude's like, yo, I stuffed the car. I got this. You think they're going? And they coming around the room like this is like criminals.
Like criminal
therapy.
Stories.
You know what I'm saying? Say, yo, shorty, why you up in here? And I'm like, I try to make it sound as gangsters. I was like, yo, they try to get me. That night I walked out Central Bookends into the courtroom, saw the judge there, and he looked at me, and and I looked into the courtroom. It was empty. It was my mom and my dad sitting back there. And I realized that I was causing a lot of pain to them. And so that divide was there between me and my father. And then when I, finally made it through high school, I used to steal. I used to do all types of dumb stuff on Jamaica Avenue. But just disappointing to my, looking back now, I was like, why did I even do that, But did a lot of dumb stuff. That divide came. And then when I finally was turning my life around and started really researching Jesus, my dad died. Wow. So when he died, he died, and I kept thinking, like, this man went to the grave probably thinking I'm a failure. And the Lord stepped in the day of his death. My brother pulled me in the room and said, you're thinking Dad thought you were a failure, right? And I'm looking at him like, how you know I'm thinking that? He said, I just want you to know that man loved you and just begun to minister to me. And it's one of those times now, this is the other aspect of God, where you go from the natural to the supernatural, and it's almost like, how'd you know I was thinking that? How'd you know I was feeling that? How did you know to say that in this moment? And when you begin to live for Jesus, you'll have many of those moments where you're like,
God
woo,
moments.
oh man, where it's
God
like,
moments,
you know, I needed that. And but I wore those lenses for a while. I was angry at God. I didn't want to hear it. So you know, I can ramble. You got to cut me off.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying what you're saying.
These
is
are all a
deep.
lens. These are
Yes.
all. This is how I got all these different lenses. Low self-esteem. At that point, I almost became to the point where if God did, and this is what I think happens to a lot of atheists. There's a moment where you feel you blame God.
Yeah.
You know, there's a story in the Bible with the men on the boat. The storm arose. Jesus is asleep, and somebody asked, "Where's Jesus?" Somebody said he's asleep. They woke him up, and the question that they asked him was, "Do you not care?"
Do you not care?
And if you're not careful, that's what storms do.
Yeah.
They make you think that God doesn't care. And so in that moment, that was what was happening to me. And that's the moment where I begun to even go further into things that I just felt like I'm gonna live however. And met my wife, she got pregnant. And I think I fell to the lowest of lows when I told my wife at the time, you got to get rid of this baby because, I got a future ahead of me. And I sat in the car, Fred Hammond was playing, Every Step of a Righteous Man is Ordered by God. And you can trick everybody else, but you got to live with you.
Yeah.
And when you sit there and you know all your dirt and you know all the stuff you're doing, there's some people that are callous to themselves and they can go on doing dirt forever. But then there are those people who after a while, man, you just got to say, if I continue down this path, I'm going to ruin me and ruin a lot of lives. I was getting ready to ruin her life. I was getting ready to ruin the baby's life. I was getting ready to continue on this path and, live this fake life. And I just cried out to God. And I went to my wife and I dropped to her feet and I said, listen, I'm going to try to get this right. Let's keep this baby. And here we are years later. God has blessed us, blessed our ministry. And, that's a small part of the story. And the Lord begun to move those lenses, move them as I begin to apply his word, in my life. But you can't ask confused people to create an identity for themselves in the first place. And so, the artist that continues to perpetuate this stuff, at some point they've got to realize that you are part of the problem. Yeah. You're part of it. And I just wish that because you see them as they get older, they change perspective, and that's what age does. And I don't only hold them responsible, I hold the labels. A lot of the labels that make this music, I've heard label owners just simply say, I know this is bad for the community that we sell it to, but I've got to eat.
Wow.
I've heard that myself. There's interviews out there. You got to do the research. You will see the label executives say that I am aware that I'm poisoning their community, but it's paying my bills.